everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the Light Action Gateway and today's topic of water with Teara Ashby. So excited to be here again with you. Welcome back, Teara.
Thank you.
And yeah, if you're on here today with us live, feel free to chat in and say hello. And anything before we get started, because I'm gonna take the chat screen off for part of the chat. Katie will be monitoring it so she can bring it in. But if you have questions you'd like to hear about water, please let us know. Teara is going to lay out the framework, the foundation first.
And how are we inviting people to come on, or is it just questions as they come up and then I can bring them up in the moment, or what do we feel about that?
Absolutely. As long as they're willing to go on YouTube later, they can come live on, or they can ask the question in the chat and then we can translate it for them.
Okay.
Hey, Dave.
Loving it.
Hey,
1,000
Steve.
things.
Oh, that's nice.
Sacramento.
Sacramento, right on. All right. Hi, Lori from Vernon. Hi, Carrie from Mexico.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, Denise from
Castlegar.
Castlegar.
Wow.
Hi, Andrea from Pitt Meadows. Right on. We got a good crew here today.
So
Okay,
far,
well,
no one's in the same place.
well,
Everyone's everywhere.
we are broadcasting live from the studio in Comox, where it's a beautiful sunny day. Hi, Lisa from Vancouver. And we're going to get started because Teara has a ton to cover. And so I'm going to give it over to her. And then Katie and I are going to jump in with our questions. And you're going to hopefully jump in with yours. So shall we get started?
Yeah.
Hi,
And
Rachel from Vancouver.
just a reminder too, if you do have a question, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll do my best to bring it into the conversation when there's a bit of a space, or we can ask some of them later. But feel free to please post your questions.
Yeah, right on. So I'm going to hand it over to you. If you want to start today, Teara, where are we going to start with this topic? Teara, I wish I could show you, but Teara's literally brought a basket full of books. And so we're gonna try to just download the book that is in her brain rather than read all the books, but we'll see what we can do.
So hello everyone. Thank you for having me back again. Anytime somebody finds out that I'm a water researcher, or I do research into water, the first two questions I always get asked is, do you know of Emoto's work? And what water filter should I be using? And I will come back to those questions, so you don't have to post those questions. We got those covered already.
Nice.
But whenever I hear those questions, I always think, but there's so much more about water that we can talk about that we're missing out if we're just looking at those two different areas. So I want to start by saying there is no such thing as H2O. Drop mic, I'm done. There is no such thing as H2O. You will never be able to isolate a molecule of H2O out of a body of water. The actual H2O with the red ball in the middle and the two blue balls on either side is a completely an artistic rendition of what water looks like. Never will you find H2O in the world.
Never?
Never. So for example, if I'm looking at the ocean that we see outside the window here, or I'm looking at a beautiful mountain lake, all of the water in that lake is constantly exchanging hydrogen molecules all the time. In fact, every oxygen changes a hydrogen molecule every picosecond, which is 1/1,000,000th of a second. So within 1 second, each oxygen molecule has danced with a million different hydrogen molecules. So at any given time, the structure of the water is like H2O3 or H3O2 or any of these other combinations, but it will never be H2O.
Never.
Never. It's impossible in bulk water to have that because of this constant exchange of hydrogen molecules every 1/1,000,000th of a second.
Wow. How come then they say that there is H2O? Where is
The biggest misconception.
huh?
So if you're looking at bulk water, so bulk water where you're in a body of water and you're having all of these flickering different displays of water in different configurations, there's multiple studies looking at all the different configurations of that you can have in these places. It means that it becomes, with that many different bonds exchanging all the time, it becomes a very great resource for information storage. So when you have an open system in a lake like that, a beautiful pristine lake in its own ecosystem, it's in constant dynamic communication throughout the entire body of water. So if somebody comes and takes a drink out of the water, like a beautiful fawn, the entire body of water exchanges that information. So it is a receptacle of information, which means it's also a receptacle of information from everything that's happening in the world all around us. So it's basically a water of information that's constantly in formation, which is a concept of Ervin Laszlo's, that we are constantly information in formation because of our water and the structure of our water and the interchange between this ecosystem and how we can talk about it. So that's bulk water. Bulk water is a little bit different from another species of water called interfacial water. So interfacial water is anything, so an interface is anything that comes in contact with the water. So it could be the interface with the surface of the water, which is in contact with oxygen, or it could be the interface of the sides of the lake where it comes in contact with rocks, or it could be the interface with the fish that are in there, or if it starts to have water motion and you have a vortex, now you have an interface that goes through the whole vortex. When water comes up against an interface, it spontaneously forms into a new structure of water that has been known from Dr. Gerald Pollack's work as easy water, or the fourth phase of water. And what we find is instead of all of those oxygen molecules exchanging all the hydrogens, they actually come together in a structured lattice that looks very much like a honeycomb in multiple layers that are shifted a little bit 60 degrees to each other on each layer so they can be compacted together, which means the hydrogens now are isolated and only interact with the oxygen that they're associated with in this honeycomb lattice. And structured water like this has many different characteristics than what you would find in the bulk water. So there's no more of this flickering information display that you have. It is very stabilized. It's stabilized to great distances away from a membrane. It has new characteristics in that the structured water itself actually has a lot of negative charge to it, which means it pushes all of the positive charge away. So you have a charge separation difference. The charge separation difference, like any battery, creates motion. So there's actually a flow, spontaneous flow that's associated with it. It's more dense. The temperature of it is lower. The viscosity is different. The optic characteristics are different. So it becomes a whole different way for water to interact.
So it's more like we froze here. Katie, can you still see us?
Yeah, you're totally good.
Okay, it's my computer again since I ran this update. I am going to jump off for a second because it's really distracting for us to be frozen. Hang on a second.
At least my mouth was shut.
Well, you're the only one who can see it. Oh, they're gone. Well, I'm here quickly, Alex. If you don't have volume, maybe try the settings in your computer, or if not, just let me know, Alex, if you haven't found your volume yet, and we'll see what we can do. If you can even hear that.
So that whole thing was pretty mind blowing to me. I don't know about to you. The question I have is this interfacial water. It's kind of like a boundary between bulk water and something else. It's thicker, right? You said the viscosity. It's more like is it more like a gel?
Yes, it's a much thicker, more viscous fluid. It's now, we call it the fourth phase of water because we're no longer looking like a solid, liquid, or gas. We're looking at this sort of colloidal, viscous, gelatinous type water.
Okay, so how does the information, if water is always carrying information and you're getting all of these every picosecond?
Picosecond.
Katie just left. All this exchange that happens in the water, how does that exchange happen if this interface is sort of not carrying that information? You said it's stable. So how does the information from the universe or outside of the body of water get through the gel and into the bulk water? Do you know? Does that make sense?
No, because it goes to the bulk water to start with, so it doesn't have to go through the interfacial water. It just goes right into the bulk. Or do you mean the surface of the water?
Like say the fawn is drinking the water, and it's mostly connected with the interfacial water when it's doing the drinking, right? Or the interfacial water is very, very thin, like, so it's connected with what's below it. But say there's a weather pattern that's passing overhead, just a change in atmospheric pressure or something, and that information then is in the water somehow. How does that get translated through the interfacial water, or it just goes straight in? I don't get it, clearly.
We have, well, maybe this is, yeah, and I think this question might help, or maybe it won't, but Aaron asks, so there are 3 kinds of water being described: bulk, interfacial, and structured, or is it interfacial and structured? Or maybe we can go really briefly again through.
It's 2 types, so it's bulk and interfacial. And another word for interfacial is structured, because it creates this honeycomb pattern.
Gotcha. Okay. So the bulk is like much thinner, and it's like a lake or like a big body of water. Or does it have to be a big body of water? Just the part that's not touching.
It's the part that's not touching. So it's even the water that's inside your glass.
Yeah.
In the center part of your glass would be bulk water. And
Right.
in that bulk water, it has this constantly flickering display of multiple different water subspecies or subtypes because of the different bonding patterns with so many different other components to it.
Right. And then the interfacial water or the structured water is the water that's up against the surface or something that's not the water molecule, whether it be air or a fish or a fawn drinking water.
The glass.
And then that water becomes that honeycomb structure. And so what purpose does it serve? Is it like a barrier of sorts, or what is its purpose? Is that too big of a question?
Well, you'll have to ask God that, because I didn't invent this, but it's
fair enough.
But the characteristics of it become quite interesting because it has this whole new properties to it. So let's then, if you're ready to dive deeper, let's translate that into the body. Because in the body, there's nothing that's in the body that's further than a micron, which is a very small measurement from an interface, which means all water within a living system is interfacial water.
Okay.
So historically in biology, all biologists have always disregarded water as the inert solvent that they need to get rid of in order to study the important stuff. So it was just water was always considered just the thing that fills in spaces. And so they always disregarded it. So if you went and you look at any textbook that shows a cell that was done under an electron, like a scanning electron microscope, what they do is they spend a lot of time trying to get all of the water off of this cell before they take a picture of it. So they cryo freeze it to minus 900 degrees. They add all of these really harsh solvents in order to get it all, make it denuded or completely removed of it, all of the water that would be in the surrounding area of it. And then they take a picture. And then they tell us that this is what a living cell looks like in our body. But that's not a living cell. That's a cell that's needing to protect itself against all of these assaults like cryofreezing and solvents. So we can't then deduct that that's what a cell looks like inside of our body.
Wow. So that
So
flips
there was
everything on its head.
exactly. So I'm going to go back to the mountain lake. The lake is an ecosystem in itself because you're looking at it in the context of the global environment that it sits in. You can't take a little sample of water out of that lake and go someplace else and say, this is how I'm going to describe this mountain lake because of this sample of water. You can't describe a physical body by looking under a scanning electron microscope at this dead frozen cell and say, this is what it looks like in my body, and this must be how it works. So if we take that a little bit further, so they do recognize that there was all this water around this cell that they had to get rid of. We are used to saying that the body is 70% water, and that's true. We're 70% water, the earth is 70% water, but that's 70% water by weight. When you start to look at these molecular studies, we are actually 99% water by molecule, which means 99% of us is water, this structured interfacial water. And only 1% are these bioactive molecules that we study in all of our classes and say that this is the construction of the tissular human form and this is how it works. So they've completely removed the main player here, which is water, and said that it's just the thing that fills in the spaces.
Wow.
So to give you more numbers to make this more accurate, let's look at hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a simple molecule that you find in red blood cells. A single hemoglobin molecule has 7,000 water molecules attached to it in a structured form, making a hydration envelope.
Wow.
We have 270 million hemoglobin molecules in every red blood cell, which means a single red blood cell has 1.89 trillion water molecules associated with it.
Wow. That's incredible.
Those are big numbers.
Yeah, those are huge numbers.
So then let's look at some of the properties of this interfacial water. We said that there's this charge separation. So when it's nicely organized, it has more of a negative charge to it. It's also lower in temperature and has these other characteristics. That means that there's a part where where it's pushing these positive charges away, which means there's a whole buildup of positive charges in one spot and a buildup of negative charges in another spot. And this then, just from the characteristics of water, means we have a huge reservoir to run redox reactions within the cell, which means most of our energy may not be coming in this form of ATP and these ATP pumps going across cell membranes and all of these other things when we have this stockpile of energy freely available just with the characteristics of water itself.
Wow. So we have the blood cell that has the structured water within it and surrounding it, you said like an envelope around it?
Yep.
And
basically all the water in our body is structured, right?
right.
Every
right.
like interstitial water in between cells, in our bloodstream, in the bone tissue, all that water is structured water.
Wow.
None of it's bulk water. Is that right?
Wow.
So if this structured water can't hold, you didn't say this, but I'm going to say this, and it's wrong. It can't hold memory. But you said that structured water doesn't hold the same sort of ability to play with energy as bulk water. That's wrong?
No.
So what did you say earlier? You said bulk water was changing a lot more than structured water, though.
Yeah.
So, and bulk water was gaining hydrogen molecules and losing hydrogen, and all of this, like all the oxygens were exchanging their formation all the time, whereas structured water is much more structured, stable. So how does information get stored in structured water? Is that information known?
That's still a major area of research right now, even though we do know that it is stored.
Okay. So somehow we are the storage of information through structured water. And what are the electrical, you mentioned the redox reactions and this massive storage of energy in 99% of our water. Like we're basically run off water, literally. So what other sort of properties does this structured water have in terms of transmitting information? Like if we wanted to get a signal from our head to our toe, how would that look through the water?
Good question. So the most common protein that we have in our body is in the form of collagen. So collagen spontaneously forms into triple helical structures. And we know when you have something that's a helical structure, it likes to hyperorganize the water that's associated with it. So there's 3 different groupings of structured water with different structures associated with every collagen molecule. So there's a grouping that's super ultra structured. There's a grouping that's a little less structured, and then there's a grouping that's a little bit more characteristic of bulk water, although it's not bulk water. And each of these 3 groupings of water molecules do different information transmission around this collagen fiber. Well, the collagen fiber makes up our entire fascial network, let alone other things into our body. And so there's been recent research down in California showing with molecular studies that every single collagen fibril carries 18 columns of water associated with it in these different groupings of water. And then a fibril, you take multiple fibrils and it makes into a fiber, and then the fiber makes this whole collagen structure that's inside of us. The grouping that's in the very center of the helix, this ultra structured grouping, becomes this really interesting, dense form of water where they start to recognize, it's called proton hopping mechanism occurs. So the proton hopping mechanism, if you think of Newton's cradle of alternating balls, although this is force transmission, but you think of one ball comes in and then almost spontaneously the other ball goes off the other side. Just as a visual, it's the same thing with these collagen fibrils. If one hydrogen molecule goes into the one end of the collagen fibril, spontaneously a hydrogen molecule comes off the top end of the fibril. The collagen fibrils can grow up to 3 meters in length, which means I can have a fibril that starts at the top of my head and goes down to the bottom of my foot. And if I put a hydrogen molecule in the top of my head, spontaneously one comes off the bottom of my foot. And this is information transmission. They're starting to see that these collections of collagen fibrils also are very analogous with the Chinese acupuncture system and the meridians. And they're noticing that
super neat.
Acupuncture points are little openings into this ultra highway of information transmission that's going through. So in my thesis, I talked about now recognizing that there's about 3 different ways to transmit information within the body. The first way that we haven't talked about is actually called quantum entanglement. And they're noticing this a lot with water molecules as well as many other molecules. So this is the one part of quantum physics that Einstein could never buy into. And he always called it spooky action at a distance because he couldn't describe it. But it's been proven quite a few times over. If anything comes in contact with each other and there's an association, it doesn't matter how far apart you put these 2 things, they will spontaneously act in the same way. So you have information transmission within the body through quantum entanglement, which is analogous to teleportation. It's instantaneously over long distances and not in the confines of space and time, which is the 3rd dimension. The second type are these collagen fibrils with a proton hopping mechanism, which is very much analogous to, say, the Autobahn in our world, where you're traveling at all these ultra high speeds. And then we have the nervous system that they teach about in school, which is still a linear transmission rate through these ion pumps. So I always say that the information or the nervous system is actually a step down or a dampening mechanism for information transmission within the body. If you're traveling on the Autobahn and you want to pull into your driveway, you have to slow down to actually get to your driveway. So the nervous system dampens all of this information transmission that's happening throughout the body in order to deliver it to the specific cell for the effect that we want it to have.
Wow, mind just blown. Yeah, right? Oh,
I feel
the
like
nervous system is actually the slowest of those 3.
right.
And we start to see this if, say, you see a runner at a runner's block and the gun goes off. the amount of time that it would take for the sound of that gun to go into the ear, to go to the brain, for the brain to go, oh, that was a gun, I guess I better do something, to go to the other part of the brain to say, okay, feet, start running, to go all the way down to my feet. The runner has already run 5 meters before he's cognizant of a gun sound.
Wow.
So
So,
the information is going through one of these other pathways.
not the nervous system.
No.
Wow. That's so interesting.
So then I want to push it more. You're still stewing on this.
Yeah,
Now
I feel like
got me
my
in a rabbit
brain.
hole.
Yeah. Wow. That's
We
incredible.
talked about memories being in the brain. I want to challenge that.
Oh, yeah. That's right for challenge. Go for it.
So the only part of the body that does not contain collagen is the brain. But what we have seen is the brain has these microtubules that are arranged in a fractal holographic antenna display. So fractal holographic antennas are things that you use every day. They're what's driving the computer that we're talking on. They're on your smartphone. They're processors. The interesting thing about these microtubules and this fractal holographic antenna is the inside diameter of the microtubule is 5 microns, which is the same diameter as the internal part of the collagen fiber. So these tubules are actually full of structured water, processing information. But the thing with a processor in your computer is that's not where you store the memory. The processor pulls up the memory, works with it, decides something else, and puts the memory back into the memory bank. The memory is actually in all the collagen fibers with the structured water inside your body. So they've never figured out how anesthetics work. They just know that they work. What they've discovered now is that they take all of the water out of the inside of these microtubules. So you're no longer able to process information. It doesn't mean that you don't have memory of information.
Oh, you mean like when you kill pain, you do it by taking the water out, but you still have the memory of the pain. That's why some people who experience surgery will have the traumatic memory associated with it, even though they don't feel the pain.
Exactly.
Wow, I think it's that's speaks to why somatic therapy. I notice somatic therapy is on the rise because talk therapy is great, but people are finding traction in somatic therapy, which is processing the emotion out of the actual body as opposed to just swimming around the experience in your mind.
Exactly.
Whew, that's so cool.
And I go back to another property that we talked about with structured water is that when it's structured, the temperature goes down. So another property in the body is when you have injury or pain or inflammation, you've destructured your water, which means the information can't be transmitted through it, or it's slowed down because it's no longer in this very structured form.
So then what does that look like? So you accidentally like have an injury or you cut yourself or something like this, and then what's happening there? Like, so the water gets destructured, and
so it's more like bulk water again.
More like bulk water.
But it's still structured. It's the third part of structured water, just to be clear. It's not bulk water.
It's not bulk water that you would find there, but it's not organized and structured in these honeycomb lattices at 60-degree planar differences between layers. It's disorganized.
And then what is the result of that? That is
you've lost information transmission through that area because of the lack of structure to it.
Right.
And so you get it back through the healing process.
The healing process restructures your water. So health is being in your structured form.
So we should be focusing on the health of the water in our body over pretty much all else.
So we talk about the water crisis on Earth right now. And the thing is we have the same amount of water now on Earth as we had a million years ago. Like we're a closed system. I mean, there is some arguments talking about ice comets hitting and their contribution to the water of our planet, but it's really negligible compared to what we have. So I like to go to like the waterfalls, and I stand beside the waterfalls with all the water steam coming up, and it's like I'm standing in dinosaur pee, because it is still the same water as when the dinosaurs are here. And the thing is we don't have a water shortage. We have a healthy water shortage. And the ways that we're treating our water and the things that we're doing to our water is leading to unhealthy water.
What are we doing to our water then that is unhealthy? And then as a maybe part two, or you were already going to get into that, how do we bring back the health of our water?
So I did a sort of preliminary side questionnaire when I was doing my thesis, because I think the general population believes that the health or unhealth of our water has to do with what the chemical constituents that are inside of it. So everybody's telling me, oh, you need more alkaline water, which means you have to put more minerals in it and all this other stuff. But really, it's not the chemical constituents within the water that makes it healthy or unhealthy. It's the information that's contained in the water. And the way to remove the information is not to filter it. I mean, you can filter it. It's still good to get all the bacteria out. But the way to restructure your water, to rechange the information that water is going to give you, is to put it back into motion. Healthy water is water in motion. And it's, if you think of a nice bubbly mountain brook coming down the side of the mountain, it's joyous and light and happy and dancing as it comes down, and it's taking in all that sunlight and all that healthy vegetation that it goes through. That's healthy water. Versus if you look at a slough that's thick and goopy and not moving anywhere, that's not healthy water. So it's not just about filtering out the goop that's in the slough. It means putting it in motion again, getting it moving.
Once again, nature provides exactly what we need.
And if you go back and look at nature and just ask, what would nature do here? I think all of our answers are there. And I'm happy to see new technology starting to ask exactly that question, is putting it back into what nature would do with it. Nature would never have a straight stream, and it would never create a 90-degree angle. Both of those things destructure the water. Nature, and any brook that you see that's free to do what it wants to do, has a combination of vortexes that go in both directions. So we have two types of vortexes. We have an implosion vortex and an explosion vortex. An implosion vortex puts information into the water, whereas an explosion vortex takes information out of the water. And as the stream goes down and it goes in each direction, you're getting a combination of implosion and explosion the whole time, so that it really regulates the information that it's carrying.
It keeps everything it's keeping the water balanced, so it's not taking in too much information, or too much information is leaving. It's keeping its flow within itself as the water flows.
Yes. And self-regulating itself, and becomes this rhythmic sort of beating heart, if you want to say like that.
Wow. We have a question that, really quick, if you don't mind, just popped in. Carrie asks, if our only option is plastic bottled water, is there something we can do to recreate information?
Yes, and I would say the minimum part that I would recommend is swirl it before you drink it, but get it out of the plastic.
Right, because the plastic is giving through, that's the structure part that's up against the plastic, is giving information to, that's how the water is being informed.
Yes, and the other thing about plastic, especially plastic under fluorescent lighting, the fluorescent lighting really destructures the plastic, so it actually leaks chemicals into the water, and so it's quite toxic actually. So if you can get it out of the plastic, that would be good. And then I would stir it or swirl it just to give it, and talk to it if you'd like to.
Does music, and I think there was this, I'm sure you've heard of this, where there's pictures of water molecules when someone, it was like certain kinds of,
This is Emoto.
This is a moment.
oh, that's him. Okay. I was like, I wasn't sure if that was it, but yeah. Okay. Right.
I knew
Right.
this was going to come up. So you almost have to be living under a rock to have not heard of Emoto's work. But if you're living under a rock and haven't heard of Emoto's work, Masaru Emoto was a very beautiful semi-scientist in Japan. And what he was doing is he was talking to the water and then he was freezing it and making water snowflakes, crystals, and then taking pictures of the crystals. And so he found that if you said, I love you to the water, and then you took a picture of the crystals that it made these beautiful crystals. And if you said, you're ugly, or I hate you, or all the negative things, then you have these ugly crystals. So something I wanted to say that I don't think people realized about Emoto's work is that it's really subjective. What he did is he took, he put a drop of water in, like, so he says, I love you to the water. He puts a drop of water into 50 different Petri dishes and freezes them. But then he goes through, and it's not about picking, because every snowflake is different. Every drop of water will freeze in a different way. It wasn't about going through and picking the ones that looked the most common. He went through and looked for the ones that were the most beautiful because he associated loving with a beautiful thing, versus the other ones he looked for the ones that they're most destructive because that's what he saw. So there was a real subjectivity to this type of work. Not to say that there isn't something there, but it is very subjective. What I really like about his work is that he really brought it to the attention of the public. So at least people are starting to talk about it.
Right.
One of the, and right now there's scientists out there that are trying to find ways to quantify it and make it a little bit more valid so that we can put it into the scales of the rest of the research that we're doing. But I would like to extend on that and show you a book from my friend Veda. What Veda did, and this is in the book list, what Veda did is she would put objects or words or things by a Petri dish full of water and then freeze the whole Petri dish and look to see what the water does. So just to give an example, Veda said to the Petri dish, hi, and then she froze the water. And then she looked throughout the whole Petri dish and she actually found an image, HI, within the water, hi. And she said, okay. And so she said, do you know who I am? And she froze the water. And she looked through the frozen water and she found the initials VA. No. Veda Austin.
No.
I just got chills all over my body.
And
What?
I don't want to show you all the pictures in this book, but I want to see if I can find one that you can see on here.
And I do have a question, one that came in. This is my dad, actually. Do magnets help water structure at all? Like, do magnets impact?
They can. I think that becomes a little bit more complex in what you're actually looking at there. I think that there's some research being done right now looking at the implications of that. I kind of know that there's research on that right now. So I think that is a much more complicated question than just the baseline of what we're talking about right now. But yes, I think so.
A deeper dive.
A deeper dive. I don't think.
But it's only one way to structure water. There's many other, or it's only one way to inform water, or
yeah, I would say inform water.
Yeah.
So I'll show you this. I don't know if they can see it on the screen. So here she put broccoli beside the dish of water, and then she froze it.
Do you want to prop it up a bit? Oh, there we go. Whoa! Wow. So what does this mean in? I might be jumping ahead, but the way we talk, like, what are we communicating with, and the way we speak about ourselves and about each other, then physically that has implications on our health. It's not woo-woo. There's actual structural changes in the way we talk to ourselves.
Yep.
Or each other. Wow.
And so I don't think it's far-fetched to start considering water to be a living organism.
That we can communicate with.
That we can communicate with. And that is a very integral part of us. And when we look at the entire evolution of man, I think the thing that we forgot to look at was water. because it is so ubiquitous around us. It's the thing that we didn't look at. It's the same thing as the saying, ask a fish to describe water. What are they going to say? It's their entire existence and environment. They don't even consider anything different.
Right. I feel like the word I've said the most in this, I just keep saying, wow, like it's so, because it is just it's kind of like that saying, like the answer is been right in front of you all along and you just haven't seen it because you're so close to it. Like exactly like you said, same thing. It's just quite shocking. And it just makes the mind reel as to so if we know this, how can we apply this and support ourselves and our environment and our planet in a more loving and powerful and healing kind of way. It just like my mind is just like ticking through what does this mean and what are the real world effects or things we can do. Or
well, and I think looking at our water is a very big part of us. If we're going to pull ourselves out of where we're at right now, I think this is key, is looking at water and looking at treating it in the way that water wants to be treated, not in the way that we think it should be treated. You know, healthy water is not us pouring chlorine and fluoride and all these other things in it in order to have, you know, these city water systems that we're supposedly helping people with. Putting water in pipes and having 90-degree angles only breaks up the water. I think, you know, there's a big discussion in this crisis that we have on the planet on how we're going to turn it around. And I think water has to be the real key, because honestly, water was here before us and it's going to be here long after us. And it is the absolute beauty and the heartbeat of this planet is water.
I just got the chills when you said that. That's so powerful. That's so powerful.
And our planet breathes and moves and circulates just like we breathe and move and circulate. And our planet is constantly receiving information from all the structures around it, which is the whole cosmos. And we have access to that if we just sit and listen.
So then, if we want to communicate with the cosmos, do we communicate through water? Is that... Wow.
You are a receptacle of water that is information in constant formation.
So amazing. Wow. Yeah.
So can you use this to quickly describe homeopathy and how that might work? Or have you probably thought about that?
So homeopathy is actually where a lot of water research really started to take off. In 1988, there was really big studies done by Jacques Bonaviste in France trying to quantify homeopathy. And they were looking at how this information is actually being transmitted in water and how water actually holds this information. And so there's a ton of research in homeopathy with, I don't think we have the answer yet, but we're looking at how do we take a constituent and put it in water and still leave the information of that constituent in water, but completely dilute it out to the point where there'd be no statistical way that there's still that constituent in water, which is past Avogadro's number. So we are seeing that there is definite transmission of this information without the element being present. So that goes back to what filter do you use? Well, it doesn't matter if you filter something out of the water, it's still going to contain the information of it anyways.
Wow. So then what do you said you were going to bring this up and I'm asking you now. So then how can we drink and bathe in our homes and use water that is like, what's the best option?
And that's tough because I don't think we've found the best option yet. I think there's still a lot of things that we're looking at. Europe is far more advanced in this than we are here, way more advanced in this. I mean, we're still looking solely at filtration here or adding in chlorine and things like that, whereas they're way past that. Most of the systems that they have there, they're looking at an element of filtration for sure. I mean, we still want to take the big stuff out, but then we also want to restructure it. So there's there's filtration, but there's also restoring the vortical energies of water.
Growing up,
Sorry,
go
there's
ahead.
systems now. I mean, you can get filters on the water in your house, but what I would recommend, there are systems now that actually vortex the water as it comes into your house. So there is a company in Vancouver that carries these vortical pipes that you put onto the main pipe coming into your house, or if you're in an apartment or renting, you can put it on each feature in your house. I vortex all of my water. I have, it's called a revitalizer. I vortex it, and when I do homeopathic remedies for myself, I write the remedy on the outside of my vortexer and vortex the remedy into the water. That's how I take them. So not even taking a supplement, because it will still contain that information.
What I love about
Sorry,
go ahead.
if you vortex the water before it comes into your house and then it goes through all these 90-degree pipes, it loses something.
It loses a bit,
but it still has more.
And they show that you'll need less water for your washing. That like the feeling of it is actually different. Even with I mean, my friends all thought I was crazy when I got this vortexer, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this doesn't do anything." And then they all show up at my house with mason jars wanting water. But we did do taste tests, and I've done taste tests by putting different words on it, and they taste different. They literally taste different. The vortex that comes into the house, when you bathe in it, you actually feel cleaner when you're done. You feel more restored, more revitalized. There is a difference. I even had my friend put one in her house, and the plumber's like, "This is the strangest thing I've ever seen, and this, you just wasted your money." And he was convinced at the end was going to go buy one for himself. So there is a difference.
Yeah, we had one growing up in our house. My dad got one. It was this thing, and it sat on this, and it did this to the water. And I always was like, "What is happening here?" And but it makes total sense now. And I wonder if they'll have like vortex bathtubs or something like this one day. Like, I feel like you can take this so far, even just writing the words on your for your remedies on your water, and then taking that's incredibly powerful. And I love how it's bringing what was once woo woo in our society, or the Western society, which in essence has like it's like tainted with the energy of shame, like to talk about these kind of things, you're foolish or whatever. But I love how there's science being put to the things that might otherwise seem too far out there. And
and not just science, this is science coming from Nobel laureates. Like, these are just not little hokey pokey backyard people. These are Nobel laureates that are giving lectures on some of these things and coming up with some discoveries that we can't explain. Like, this just changes everything. It changes the way that we look at medicine. So you take that medication, that drug, and what does it do in your 99% water? Do we need it to be that strong? It changes the way that I'm a somatic practitioner, I'm a clinician. It changes the way that I treat the body, because really the body ends up being a bag of fluid of varying densities. And I want to make sure that there's free and open interchange between all of those bags of fluid, which means, is there really cell membranes, or is that just what it looks like in a dead cell underneath a scanning electron microscope that's trying to protect itself? There was, his name was Ludwig Edelman, was trying to take scanning electron microscope images of cells by trying to maintain the environment that they are in. Just like we talked about the lake, and you need to take the lake in the context of the environment that it lives in. If you want to look at a cell within the body, you have to take it in the context of the environment that it lives in, because it's in complete communication and interaction with the environment that it lives in.
And this is like an all signs point to that, saying we are all one and everything is connected. And this is the growing, what it sounds like, proof of that.
Because you could never have H2O.
Right. Wow. Okay, we have a few questions here if you're cool to answer. Laura asks, what about the Try Best Do a Water Revitalizer, or Do It Water Revitalizer?
Duet. Yeah, I've heard of that one. Is that, I think that's one that Tom Cowan promotes. I'm not sure, Laura, that might be the one. Yeah, but there's so many of these things on the market, right? So is, yeah.
Just
So Vortexer just spins water, right? Is there anything you're looking for in a Vortexer that makes it one better than another?
Well, one thing I can't explain about the vortexers, or I haven't found a reason why, is every vortexer that spins water spins it in cycles of 9 minutes. So you get 9 minutes, 18 minutes, or 27 minutes. I don't know why the number 9. Most of them come with a mineral pod that you put in them. So you are getting alkaline water because you are putting minerals in the water, but the minerals in the water also help structure the water because you'll have structured water around every mineral. So it makes it denser, more structured water. They're all sort of the same like that. Again, I don't think the systems that we have in North America are really all that great.
Right. We're still using a lot of energy to do something that you could do with a natural gravity, probably. And yeah, so we're at the infancy stage of getting this kind of.
I would love to see city water systems go to more of a flow form technology where they go through this. It's basically to do implosion and explosion vortexes. You'll see, if you can look it up online, they're called flow forms. And they do this figure 8 motion as they go down. So you're informing it the whole way that you go down. I think that would be a really interesting experiment to have a citywide system with water like that to see what changes that they find. They also find if you look at anthroposophical farming or biodynamic farming, they're looking at ways to not have water come out of pipes. They're finding they're getting better hydration to the plants, better structuring in the plants, better nutrition in the plants, in the way that they treat the water before it goes. I'm not saying treating by putting chemicals into it. I'm saying treating in how they have flow forms before they get the water to the plant.
So then
this is a way to increase microbial diversity by changing, by energizing the water or making it alive in this way. You're going to increase microbial diversity in the soil or the human gut. I mean, I was speaking last weekend about how different foods can increase microbial diversity, but what you're saying is basically the water can do that on its own, probably. Absolutely.
Well, it'd be a big contributing factor for sure.
Yeah.
So if you were to go to a stream, because like we're told don't drink out of this because it might have bacteria or whatever, would the healthiest choice of going out into nature, putting a glass jar under the water and bringing that home, is that or is that safe, or is that a good choice?
So technically speaking, if you look at the work of Viktor Schauberger, who is a Austrian ranger, forest management. Anyways, he feels that if you have a brook that's able to do what it needs to do and it stays close to 4 degrees Celsius, that it is completely free of biochemicals, or not biochemicals, microbials.
Wow.
Because 4 degrees is the optimum temperature of healthy water. So, we just had the fish spawning here, and if you watch a fish almost not move at all in a really fast moving brook, it doesn't need to expend a lot of energy because it creates these vortexes around it that keeps it in that stationary position. But the only way it can do that is if the brook is at 4 degrees. So we're seeing global warming happening now, and you're watching the fish that were just spawning, and they actually had to expel a lot more energy to get up the river because the river is warmer than 4 degrees. They're unable to stay in these stationary positions.
That's incredible. I'm gonna go get some water. I'm gonna get a little thermometer and go to the stream down the way there after this. We have 2 more questions that have come in. What is the best container / material to store your water in prior to drinking it?
Glass.
Okay. And let's say you do get the water from the stream, or you go to nature, and would you still swirl it, or should you always swirl any water that you have before you drink it?
Well, if you let it sit, the longer you let it sit, the less it's going to store all of that goodness in it. So if it's been sitting for a period of time, then I would swirl it. I did have my the vortexers have been really hard to come by, and they've increased, like they've tripled in price or something. I don't know if that's a pandemic thing. So what I got from my cousin, which is super simple, is you can go and get in a lab, they would have stir dishes or stir plates that you plug in, and you put a little magnet inside your glass jar and it will stir it for you.
Oh, interesting.
So there's stir plates. And so if you look, I mean, I got it off of Amazon, but if you look, you can just get these magnetic stir plates, and then you just stir. She just got really big mason jars, and we went and got water from a well, like a deep well, which is always better, deep well water, than surface water. And she just stirred it on that.
So we got.
I have 2 questions. Are there more?
We have 2 questions. Do you want to do yours first, and then we can dive into these 2?
Oh, sure. Since they're on the tip of my tongue. Earlier you mentioned the optimal temperature, or how structured water was slightly cooler, right? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that we're structured water in the body, we're this interfacial water. But when you get a cut, I thought you were going to say something else about, like, so how does that relate to, our body temperature, which is pretty constant, and like this water temperature being slightly, I'm just confused how that relates to physiology, the structured water being slightly cooler. And then if you're, because you'd think that if someone is unhealthy, then their temperature would rise, not fall, or something. So I'm just getting a little bent out of shape. I'm thinking about it too simplistically. So,
well, if they're unhealthy, their temperature would rise because it becomes destructured water.
But what you often see in chronic illness, for instance, is someone who their thyroid's not working, let's say, and that their temperature drops.
I think you're looking at, then it becomes a host of other things, because you're looking at the endocrine system and other things like that, not just at the water.
Okay.
So the reason to bring up the temperature change in the water is that if you have an area, where you have a bruise and you find that it's hotter, often at times the scientific reason for it is that you've destructured your water. So the goal then is to get the restructuring of the water and the flow back through it.
Okay, yeah. So like the heat of inflammation. Got it. Okay, and same with fever. Even though it's a good thing, you want to restructure that in order to break the fever and to get the immune system benefits and all the rest that come from it. Okay, second question, you mentioned a slough earlier, or like stagnant water. But there's many examples of stagnant water in nature that are actually like huge filters, like bogs and marshes. I mean, these are really important aspects to how nature filters water. So
they would also be very structured.
They'd also be very structured, whereas you're saying a slough
is not moving. Is the main thing. It's not moving.
Not moving. Okay. Just wanted to figure that out for myself. Okay, thank you. What are the other questions out there, Katie?
Okay, so we have 4 now. People are getting into it. Laura asks, is Pellegrino bad? So Pellegrino is like effervescent water. That's it, yeah. Is that bad? You don't know.
In what context?
Yeah, I guess does that I don't know. I'm speaking for you now, Laura, but does that kind of how it's structured with the bubbles, and that's unnatural, then that going into our body, is that sending not so good communication?
I would say, from my perspective, that most mineral water, if you drink it as a primary source of water, is too high in the osmolality, or anyways, too many minerals hard on the kidneys. And so, minerals are important, but too many minerals, not so great as a primary water source.
And then I would also add to that even worse is reverse osmosis.
That's what I drink. And that's what so this is so interesting. So my mentor and myself, I've been drinking reverse osmosis for years now. And I like the purity of it. I like the empty starting place. I know that it's not the ultimate step, but for people, let's say if you want to take all the stress off a person's kidneys, reverse osmosis is one good way to do that, because there's nothing in it. There's no minerals in it. So it'll actually serve as a detoxification water often because it'll draw out toxins and things. So I understand what you're saying. It's not the ultimate, but why is it even worse?
Because there's nothing in it. There's no structure to it.
There's no communication.
No structure to like chlorinated, fluoridated, whatever. City water is just as unstructured. Let's be honest. So I don't see a difference there.
We can go on and on about this.
Okay, all right. Well,
I feel like
minerals structure it slightly, but you would get a negative structure with certain minerals, wouldn't you? Like even harsher structure than the body can. Anyway,
would it depend on
creative differences?
If there's like a harsher chemical, like I don't know, chlorine or whatever, in water that is more like structured or something, would that would the information in, like if you put chlorine in water that was just coming from a babbling brook or something, would that overpower the chemical? In essence, is the structure and that part more important than?
I think we're still looking at it as very black and white or very linear. There's so much more that goes into all of this.
Yeah. So if I believe, and maybe this is where belief comes in, I believe that if I say thanks to the water and I love you to my water, even though it's reverse osmosis, I'm starting to charge it up again. And that's kind of where I come down to it. I've seen that people, for instance, get these systems that have minerals added to them. And often the mineral content, because it's inorganic minerals and it's just drawn out, they're not the healthiest rocks to begin with necessarily, that can actually do harm. So I really like, Santiva was a big thing for a while. And aside from the fact that it's the 0.5 micron density, or what is it, like one, anyways, it doesn't filter to a great degree all the toxins out of it, and then it adds back these minerals. And I've also heard of the Santiva filters that don't get cleaned. They have mold in them, but that's a totally different issue. But basically, like there's no filtration system that's ideally perfect right now, except maybe the latest and the greatest out of Europe might be better.
Still not. I mean, there's nothing. I think this is a huge area that people are doing a ton of research in, and there is no ultimate answer to it yet.
Yeah, and I can say from if you're dealing with chronic illness, my experience at least has been, and maybe it's all biology of belief stuff, but that when people switch over, when I switched over to Berkey and then reverse osmosis, I noticed a difference in my immune system health. So I don't know if that's just because, I trust my mentor and, there's that relationship there or what. But I do feel that, chlorinated city water and reverse osmosis, I'd take the reverse osmosis any day personally. But yeah, if we can add these vortexers to the city system or to our house, if we can, if we're in a house and we can afford to add one of these vortexers to the main line, that might be absolutely a benefit. But then if you run it through RO system, it'll lose some of that structure, all of the structure potentially, and then you have to do it on the other side. So, yeah.
And
anyways, we're getting off topic. Yeah.
This
is not the main focus, perhaps.
We'll get to the questions, and I just had a thought too. It was like it makes it's so empowering in a way, because let's say you do have a chronic illness, or that there's an organ in a part of your body that's struggling, you can like communicate with it, tell it that you love it, tell it that, like speak to it in a loving, nurturing, supportive way every day, or as many times as you want a day. And it's not all for nothing. Like there is an impact of that. I think it's so powerful, especially in this time as we there's a lot of fear and taking our health, offering up our sovereignty and our health to like systems like the government, and we won't get into that, but to remember that we have that healing power just by speaking to ourselves. It's I don't know.
Well,
it makes me feel lighter.
Power is take a couple big breaths and have a glass of water.
Right, the basics. We have got questions flowing in, so I'm gonna. Are you guys cool to keep answering? Okay. Dave asks, electrical energy flows across conductive elements. Water has high conductivity. If water is not particulate in the H2O form, as we have been taught, does it have a frequency? And then he said, cite electric university theory. Or electric universe theory.
Oh boy. Yes.
So the question was, does it have a frequency? And the answer is yes.
Do you want to go into that?
Oh, these are rabbit holes. Yes, absolutely. Both bulk and structured, I think, have different frequencies. Like I said before, there is that charge separation in interfacial structured water that has a spontaneous flow, that we see spontaneous flow around. We actually think that that might be part of how our cardiovascular system works and our blood circulation, because think of how structured our blood would be inside that nice little tubes that they sit in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, our heart is a vortex.
Well, and
right.
I want to add to that. It's actually a double vortex. Our heart is not a pump, it's a vortexer. Mm-hmm. So the blood pumps the heart vortexes the water. So why do we need it to vortex the water? It's to put information into the blood to make it nutrient rich. So we have a double vortex. We have a horizontal vortex, that's an implosion vortex that puts oxygen into the water. And we have a vertical vortex, which is an explosion vortex that goes throughout to the body and takes the things out of the water in our blood and into our system.
That alone, I feel like we could dive into for an hour. Like I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, this whole biochemical model of physiology where the heart is a pump is it's not the full story from everything I've read.
And you can even dissect a heart with just your bare hands. You don't even need knives. You can dissect it back out to the two tubes that it starts as. It's a double Gordian knot that folds in on itself, and it's still just two tubes.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole tissue. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay, I'm going to try to keep my focus here. Are shallow level wells able to communicate? So I guess are wells that are shallow still better or still a good option as opposed to deeper well? Because I guess a shallow well is kind of like still-ish water.
Deeper wells are good because you're getting into the aquifer flow of what's deeper in the Earth's surface that has more mineral content to it. Shallow wells, I mean, this is a lot of well water technology that I don't really go into, but I would say that, you know, if you look at different thoughts about how water takes in information, like the whole Rudolf Steiner biodynamic way of charging water with cosmic information before feeding crops or feeding animals. It's a way, if it's shallow, it has more access to actually take in that information because it's closer to instead of deep underground. These are lots of questions I don't have answers to.
So in a shallow well, you could like...
I've heard that the deeper, and this makes sense to me, but the deeper the well, the more filtered the water will be from toxins. Yeah. But then you might lose that interface a little bit with the surface energy, right? Is what you're
talk into your well then too and be like,
hello there.
You're awesome. Let's do the good work. Yeah, you're the best. Okay. Laura asked, drinking occasional bubbly. So I think we said, yeah, occasional is okay. Aaron asks, so we buy alkaline water from a place that says that they do it to make it most like water should be found in nature. So are we getting too many minerals, or is that how mineralized water would have been if we could get it from nature?
The bottled water industry is such a scam. It's unregulated. They've done tests on different waters and found them actually contaminated and toxic. It's like, The whole bottled water industry is a scam. I cannot tell you one that I would recommend.
So I think it would depend, Aaron, on the company that you're getting
Yeah.
it from, their integrity, and what they're actually doing to make it charged up again and alkaline, and what their process is matters a whole lot. And it's probably impossible to comment without knowing what their process is.
I feel like it just keeps coming back to making it as simple as we can. You know, like when you think about it, going to nature or a well with a glass jar and bringing it home and drinking. And not everyone can do that now. Obviously, these days that's a privilege, but it's just so interesting how us humans are trying to figure out what is the best way, but it's there. And I wonder, is it the question of how we're living? And is that the thing that needs to shift, as opposed to trying to make nature come to us? We go to nature.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, Katie. But like certain areas, like we're so privileged in British Columbia to have access to those streams and such. But even then, like because the world is such a one thing these days, I personally feel that if you have a toxic plant upstream of a beautiful brook that is trying to heal the water, those toxins won't have a chance necessarily to completely be explosioned out of the water, or whatever process happens in nature necessarily. And so you could think you're drinking perfect water from this 4-degree brook and still have a lot of heavy metal, for instance, that hasn't had a chance to go through a bog yet and get cleansed out, or whatever the process that needs to happen in nature. Does that make sense, Teara?
It does, and they've done lots of studies looking at water after sewage plants or things that we're putting. I think Alec Bartholomew writes several books about this, and they were studying how far, or what nature had to do to actually reclaim that water into healthy water again. And it needed to go through a certain distance and enable to get that motion and the vortices to start working again before they actually saw life restore. And so I don't think there's any simple answer right now when it comes to water, what water we should be drinking, where should we be getting it, because we are all in this together. But the thing is we need to start talking about this. There's, I like your thing about keeping it simple. Then I got my eyes shut.
Okay, we're gonna end for a second. How do I do that? I've just forgotten. Oh, we're back. Okay.
I think keeping it simple is a really good strategy for everything right now. I think we really overcomplicate it, and as we overcomplicate it, we add more things to it, and we think that this is what we should be doing, when really, what would nature do is always what I go back to. Like, if this is a challenge in my life, and if I asked what would this challenge look like in nature, and how would nature resolve it, I think is the better answer for most things.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree. A fascinating session. Dave is saying thank you for the enlightenment. Yeah, this is like, I can see why your thesis was so big, like thick, like, yeah. I feel this could be an entire series and beyond. It's just so
well incredible. And I feel like we've just touched on little aspects of it. The thing is the truth of it is the globality of all of those things coming together. So we've kind of danced around like bulk water and interfacial water and water in the body and water in streams and what's healthy water, but really the truth is it's all of those things and more. Like, this is very much a skimming surface, and that water research has been going on it's the most researched thing we have on this planet is water, and it's still the most least understood. And I showed Keith, in trying to keep my head straight in writing this thesis, I call it my mind map of insanity. And it literally is my brain vomited on paper. And it's like this crazy, it's 15 feet long and 4 feet wide. And it's a timeline of water research. This has been going on since well before my map started, which was in the 1600s. And the theories and the evolution of it is amazing. And it doesn't just sit in one category of science. It covers all categories. You see it in every major religion, it has something to do with water. You
Mm.
see it in most spiritual traditions. You see it in physics and chemistry and biology. Like, we're all trying to figure out what is water, and none of us have the answer yet. Although we're starting to find these really interesting characteristics. And I think the more that we stop eliminating it as this inert solvent just filling in spaces and actually say, oh my goodness, it has a role here. It's playing a role in this whole thing. The closer we're going to start to get to some answers.
It's the
Thank
foundation.
you.
It's the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many more questions but we should probably wrap up soon. I just want to express my gratitude for what you just downloaded on us. I'm going to be spinning in a good way, vortexing with this information for weeks. And I, this was never taught in the schooling that I did. I mean, even the alternative schooling. What I think Teara is sharing with us today is so next level stuff. I'm really happy to know you, and just thank you for sharing this information.
And really quick, I put the handout. If you guys in the chat box look up at the top, it should say handouts. And if you click there, you can see the suggested reading list if you want to see all of the books that Teara recommends. I know for me, I really want to pick up that one that your friend did with the images. It's a great coffee table book.
Just published a month ago.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
There we go.
Yeah.
If you celebrate that. I mean, materialistic.
Everyone's just saying thank you.
Nice gift.
Yeah. Lots of gratitude in the chat box if you want to open up and take a look.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to me babble on about all of this all over the place. I hope it made some sense to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I think it did, and I have a funny feeling. I'm speaking for myself, so I could probably sit here all day and then the next day after and listen to everything you have to say. So I'm sure I'm not alone on that. So thank you so much. This truly is like shifts foundational ideas and beliefs that we have around water and our own power for healing, and like just I think that alone is worth its weight in gold. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here, and we'll get this up on YouTube. And I hope that the next Light Action Gateway is December 22nd in the evening at 7 p.m. So hope to see you there. And I'm sure sometime next year, we will have Teara back again, because we could always hear more from Teara if she's willing to come back and she's still around the Comox Valley, or even if she's not. So thank you very much for being here, and goodbye. Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye. See you.